This video looks at the build part of our editing process where we're going to be putting clips down on the timeline. We're going to look at two ways that we can do it: drag the timeline, and we're going to look at 3-point editing in a little bit more detail then. So to start, we've loaded up a clip, and clip is viewed in our source monitor. Drag the playhead through and find the part of the clip that we're going to want to add to the timeline. So in this case, I'm going to bring the playhead to the point where the second character, the older man, is going to walk into frame and sit down. So we'll start it about here. So to designate a portion of a clip that I want to bring to the timeline, I hit the I key. You'll have to take down these shortcuts. The I key to mark an in point, and then pull the playhead to the part where I want the clip to end when it goes to the timeline, and hit the O for the out point. Now all of these shortcuts are also buttons that you can use on the source monitor, and you'll find them over here in the program monitor as well, but you're as well to start using the shortcuts. So what we're doing is we're isolating a part of the clip, and then we're going to create a sequence. The sequence is going to have to match the settings of this clip in terms of the amount of pixels in the frame rate, and various other factors that make up the video clip's settings. So when you're shooting in HD, you want a sequence in HD so that you can output in HD, and so on and so forth. So there's a few ways that you can do it. You can click New Item and go up to Sequence, and that will give you the initial, or it'll give you a series of options that you can try and match the original settings that your camera was at when you were shooting, and that's one way of doing it. Another way that you can do it, which is a fail-safe way of making sure that your sequence matches your source clip, is to drag the clip down onto the new item button, and that will give you a composition or a sequence based exactly on that clip, and it will also place that clip in your new sequence. So now we have a sequence, and that sequence will also have the name of the clip that you've just brought in. So you might want to change that as well. So you'll see my clip was called 2, and now I have a sequence, which you can see by the little blue multi-track icon there, and hover over and say sequence, and you can call this editing practice or something. Okay, so we have a sequence and we have a clip, and even if we delete that clip now from our timeline, we'll still have our empty timeline with the correct settings for our edit. Okay, so I go back up to my clips, and 2 is still loaded in here, so just double click it just to make sure. And I and O were used to set my in and my out. Now there are another couple of shortcuts that you should get used to using: J, K, and L. J will play the clip backwards, and if you play it, tap it twice, it will go twice speed, and tap it 3 times, and we'll go backwards at 3 times speed. And the same with L. We'll play and then tap it twice, and it allows you to very kind of intuitively go backwards, stop, go forwards. So the K key will stop, but so will the spacebar. So spacebar will play and stop as well, and it allows you to just play around those points. Okay, so one way that you can bring clips down onto the timeline is to just click and drag them from here. If you click and drag the image, it will take sound and picture. And you'll see that it comes down there onto track 1. You also have the option here, if you just want to bring video down, you can drag this video icon. If you just want to bring audio down, you just drag the audio icon down. But if you drag the image, you'll get both. Okay, so clicking and dragging will allow us to bring down our clip, and now we have our clip on the timeline. Okay, now I've just disabled audio scrubbing here in the preferences, and that allows me to just scrub around here without you being deafened by the audio on the clip. Anyway, okay, so we have 2 placed on the timeline. Now, if, for example, I wanted to bring another clip down and place it before that clip starts, there's a way of dragging another clip down and doing what's called an insert edit, which allows me to load up a clip such as 1, and let's say that I wanted to take the bit before he comes in, so I'll just bring the playhead to around here, hit I, or mark an in point, hit L, or I'll just drag it through till I get to the point where he's just about to sit down, or just about to, yeah, hit the O key. Now, if I drag down here, you'll see that when I drag down onto the timeline, I get a little downward pointing arrow between 2 little white rectangles. That tells me when I drag this down and let go, it will actually place it over the part of the clip that was originally there. You'll see that if I do it again, if you look at the end of my 2 clip on the timeline, it doesn't budge. This is what's called an overwrite edit, and sometimes this is what you want to do. But if you want to insert a clip in here and allow this clip to move down to make room for it, you have to bring it down and hold down the control key on a PC and command on a Mac until you see those right pointing arrows and you see the little blue arrow turn to the right. That tells me when I let go, it does what's called a ripple edit. So the timeline ripples along to make room for my clip. So now the first clip has been inserted before the second clip. So just remember that shortcut when you're clicking and dragging. Hold down the shift or the control key and that will allow you to insert. If you don't hold down the control key, it will overwrite, which is what's called a destructive edit because it actually deletes and overwrites the new clip on top of an old clip. Okay, so that's the drag to timeline way of doing it. Now that's fine for short edits and where you don't have a long timeline with a lot of clips, but if you have a longer timeline, if you're doing a program or a documentary or something, then you want to try and use or get used to using what's called 3-point editing. So 3-point editing is a process that allows us to use our in and our out points and allows us to use other points of importance either up here or down here in the timeline and some shortcut keys to do more precise edits that are also not as prone to making mistakes such as drag to timeline and other kind of less tidy ways of doing things. So if I start off with clip number 2 again, you'll see that I have an in point and an out point, and I also have the playhead down here which also marks a point, which is my third point. So I have 3 points now that mark the source clip and give it a destination where it needs to go when it goes down to the timeline. Now over here you'll see that you have some buttons. Beg your pardon, over here we have our insert and our overwrite buttons, which actually allow us to do what we did with the drag to timeline, but without kind of the eye-hand coordination part and things possibly getting moved and deleted and shifted down the timeline accidentally. So this, again, if I click insert or overwrite, it'll do the same thing because we've no clips on the timeline. So if I go insert, you'll see that it inserts that clip between those 2 points there down to where the destination was set by the playhead. Okay, so that again allows me to do it in a very kind of an exact way. Now I could be even more exact if I decide that not only do I want this clip between these 2 points to be placed here at this destination, but I can also say I want it to go on to a different video track or audio track, for example. And you do that by reconnecting or moving the configurations between your source channel inputs here and your destination track inputs here. So if I, for example, move V1 up there and A1 down there and do the same thing by hitting insert or hitting the comma key, you'll see that it actually does the same thing, but I've designated a new track for these to go onto. So this section of your timeline here is a little bit like a patch bay or I can take V1 from my source and I can patch it into V2 and my destination, and A1 can go to A2 and so on and so forth. Okay, so I'll undo that and I'll reconfigure these back to where they were, and I'll just hit the comma key and I'll have my insert done. Now let's say we want to place our wider shot before that. Then again I can use my 3-point editing to accurately place the playhead here, or I could have hit my home key on a PC, or you'll see it as a kind of a diagonally facing upward arrow next to the numeric keypad at the Mac, and that brings the playhead to the top of the timeline. And incidentally, the up and down arrows will bring you clip to clip, or edit point to edit point, from clip to clip. So again, if I hit insert up here, or hit the comma key, it will insert 1 in ahead of 2, and it will ripple 2 down the timeline to make room for it. Now if I just undo that and instead do an overwrite, if you watch this clip, it doesn't ripple, it just stays where it is, and the clip comes in on top of it. Now again, sometimes this is what you need. If it isn't a continuity edit and you don't need to worry about spoiling the flow of action between your edits, but you need to have your edit end at this point here, and you can't afford for that clip to be pushed along, then the overwrite edit is what you want to do. Now we'll just look at another way that you can use your 3 points for a 3-point edit. If, for example, I have a portion of the timeline that needs to be filled, so if I put an in point, for example, at the first frame, and let's say I go along to 2 seconds, so I go up to my time controls here and put in 2 dot and hit enter, goes exactly 2 seconds down the timeline, and put an out point using my O key, or I could go up here, it's the same thing. Now if I clear my in and my out up here, and you can do that by right clicking, no you can't, you can go Control X or Command X, or you can right click on, sorry, you can right click on this and clear in and out. I can't remember, there is a shortcut. And let's say, for example, I need the clip to start here and play out for however much of the clip is needed for it to fill this portion of the timeline. Then I only need 1 point here, so I put an in point. So now I've got points 1 and 2 down here, saying that this is the important aspect, this needs to be filled, and I need it to start here, so I put an in point. I've got points 1, 2 and 3, so when I do an insert, it will take the clip from here on and it will only place it within the in and the out point down here. Now you can do a very similar thing when you have action that ends at a point, such as when he sits down here. You can put an out point and it will only match the action by filling this portion of the timeline with the clip ending at the out point on the timeline. So the source out point will match with the destination out point, and it's called a back time edit. So I'll insert that, and you'll see now on the timeline it plays. Done something wrong there. Yeah, there's not enough on the timeline, so I'll just delete that and maybe go 5 seconds and put an out point. So now I've got in, out. I've got an out where he sits down, so I'll just put it a little bit sooner there. So now I'll see the out point match the out point, and you can see here he sits down, so now the action ends at the right place and fills that portion of the timeline nicely. Okay, so you've got lots of options here depending on whether the duration on the source clip is important or the duration in the destination is important. So whichever kind of has the most importance is where you will put points 1 and 2 either on the timeline or points 1 and 2 on your source clip, and you can work that way. Now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to do what's called a replace edit. And a replace edit is slightly different in that it looks to replace a clip on the timeline with a clip in the source monitor so that it fills out the duration of where the clip currently is on the timeline, but we can match action perfectly on both our destination and our source. So matching action is crucial here, and I'll show you what I mean by matching action. So at the moment we've got our clip 1, which is a wide shot from behind where the guy comes in and sits down. Okay, so if I put the playhead on the timeline where he's just sitting down, and I load up my other clip, I'll clear my in and my out, and I'll bring the playhead to the part where he just sits down. Okay, now I have a matching action. He sits down here and he sits down here. I want to replace this clip with this clip and have the action perfectly match up when it comes down onto the timeline. The way that you do that is you specify your clip on the timeline, put the playhead to match the action, specify your clip in the source monitor, place the playhead where you want the action to be matched, come down to the timeline, replace replace with clip from source monitor, match frame. And now you've perfectly replaced one clip with another, and you've matched the action exactly where they need to be. So this is very important in continuity editing, where the action has to be razor sharp on the frame so that the edit perfectly flows through. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll quickly do the start of a continuity edit where we're going to start off with our wide shot from behind, and I'm going to start the action from the point where you just start to come into frame. I'll put my in point. I'm going to drag the playhead, drag the playhead along until he's just sat down. He's sitting for half a second. And I'll make sure that the playhead is at the top of the timeline, and I'll do an insert edit. Next clip I want is to roughly pick up from where he's sitting down. So we'll go from where he's just about to sit down, place my in point. Oops, too much audio. And I'll pull the playhead along. We'll give it a few seconds of dialogue. Hit the O key. So I've got point 1, point 2. I've got my playhead here for point 3. I'll do an insert edit, and now I've got two shots. One is a wide where he's coming in, he sits down. The second one, he's kind of sitting down. We've got a reverse shot of the two of them sitting together. Now, this is rough. Intentionally, it's kind of been done intentionally badly. So if I play this through, you'll notice that he essentially sits down twice. So that's going to tee us up for the next video, which is about trimming, where we're going to fine-tune this edit point so that the action perfectly flows between the two.